Welcome back. Another day of working on the 1960 Panhead. I've recently ordered some parts, had to wait for them to come in. Now I have quite a few of them and I'm going to start getting this thing back into running condition. Now to kind of recap on what I have here, this is a 1960 Harley Davidson Panhead. This is a kick-only motorcycle. I am running a Mallory ignition, an alternator, and an anti-gravity battery. What I have is a motorcycle that does not start. I can kick this thing over and kick this thing over and it will not fire at all. I do have spark, but it is intermittent. One of the things I'm noticing is when I turn the key switch on, it immediately sparks. And if I have it in the right spot, it will continue to spark without having the motorcycle running and without kicking it over. So I feel that the switch has gone bad. Maybe there's a grounding issue in there. The contacts are bad, something. So I've ordered a new switch. One of the other things that I figured out is that the Mallory ignition and this coil are not compatible. This is the wrong ohm coil for that ignition. So I have bought the proper ohm coil for this. So I'll be replacing this today as well. Other than that, it's going to be coil, spark plugs, wires, and ignition switch, and we'll see where that gets me. The goal is, not this weekend, but the following weekend, I have a motorcycle show that I'm supposed to be at. And I'd like to be able to have this thing running for that show. So I'm working on trying to diagnose what the issues are, what's going on, how to make this thing run again. Now I have checked fuel, and the carburetor is doing its job. The float is not sticking. I can twist the throttle, and I'm getting a spray of fuel into the carburetor. It is an S&S Super E. So I know I'm getting fuel. I do know that I have a leak at the bottom of the petcock here, so I must have a bad valve or a bad O-ring or something there. I do have a new petcock at the shop, at the house, and I need to bring that in. So that's going to happen soon. But we're going to dive into getting these few things swapped out today. I know I need to run to the auto parts store to get new plugs. I don't have new plugs yet, and that's something I also need to replace. I just didn't have time this morning to stop and run there. But first things first, let's go ahead and get this battery disconnected. And then once we have the battery disconnected, I'm going to work on the switch. Now, one of the things that I do before I start taking anything apart when it comes to wiring, my memory is not always that good. So I've taken pictures of the connections to kind of see how these things are going to go back together. So I can reference the photos on my phone to say, hey, I know these wires go here, these wires go here, however it was hooked up originally, because I know that that worked at one point in time. But anyway, I needed to disconnect the power from the bike, so let's get that battery undone. I did also check the voltage on the battery, and the voltage is proper. So I know the battery is not an issue. It's not weak. It's a fairly new anti-gravity battery. I do tender it in the winter, so I know that it does keep well. And I haven't had it for a very long time, but I've had it for a little while. But I did go through and check it today just to make sure that I did have proper voltage. I'm at 13.1, so I feel that that's really good. Just tucking the wires out of the way to make sure nothing contacts the battery, because I'm not going to pull the whole battery out of the battery box. I want to leave it in its place. So just move things out of the way so it was secure. As for the switch, I did buy one of the old Dixie distributing switches from Superior. This is the Japanese model. These are a little older. I've heard really good things about them. I did not find an actual Panhead switch that I liked. There are a lot of used ones out there. I'm always afraid of the used stuff because it might work, it might not work, and sometimes there's no guarantee on that type of stuff, so I didn't really want to mess with it. But now I'm going to go ahead and undo the switch from the base here, and then we'll start with unwiring it. Actually, I'll unwire it first, and then we'll take the switch off the base. One of the things I'm most excited about is this switch does not have keys for it, and the new one will have keys, so I'll be able to lock the ignition. Not that I ever take my bike anywhere where it could be compromised, but it's nice having that peace of mind to be able to lock the ignition. Something else I need to fix on this bike is I do have the neck lock, obviously, and I need to take this to a locksmith and have them make me a key for that lock as well, because I don't have that key either. This is one of those things that was purchased used, obviously, and had been in a barn for quite a few years, and those parts, those keys I should say, were missing, and they've been missing for a long time. Something I had read on one of the forums was to make sure that this base here was clean, debris-free, rust-free, or whatnot, because part of the switch's grounding is through this base. So I'm going to go ahead and lightly sand this just to get this down to some bare metal, and then I'll put the new switch on. Okay, now that I've got the switch installed and rewired, I'm going to go ahead and change out the coil here next. I did try to go to the auto parts store yesterday and order a set of spark plugs, or actually pick up a set of spark plugs. Unfortunately, I had to order them. They don't carry any auto lights or any Bosch plugs or anything that you can really use on an old Harley. Everybody in town carries Champion plugs, and those just don't work. So I ordered a set of plugs. I've cleaned these up a little bit, and I'll run these for now. But that's another day's project, right? So we'll go ahead and we'll get this coil uninstalled first. The old plug wires off, plugs out of the way. Now with the new coil installed, I'm going to go ahead and put on a set of wires. I got some Tons Performance plug wires. Not sure if they're any good. We're going to give them a shot. So we'll go ahead and get these opened up and get them installed. Now with the coil installed, new plug wires installed, I'm going to go ahead and rehook up the battery. Then we'll do a couple tests and see if we're still getting the same spark issue. If I'm not, I'm going to attempt to start the motorcycle and see if we can get it to run again. So we'll go ahead and put everything back the way it was electrically onto the battery posts. With the battery hooked back up, I'm going to turn my switch here. I'm going to watch the spark plugs and see if I get the same spark issue. I feel like I'm still getting the same issue. I'm still getting a spark in between turning the switch. The switch is engaging a lot nicer, but I'm going to go ahead and reinstall the seat and see if we can get this thing to fire. All right, now that I've got the fuel tanks drained and cleaned out, I'm going to go ahead and remove this petcock. I did take the carburetor off and I put it in the ultrasonic cleaner for about an hour and a half. There was a lot of debris in there. It was kind of gummy and gross, so it did need a good cleaning as well. So I'm going to go through and just try to button up everything and clean it all up as much as possible to get this thing running in tip-top shape. Next, I'm going to remove this temporary fuel line. I do have a new fuel filter I need to install as well. I did have some rust in the tanks, which I'm sure didn't help with the issue. So now that I know that, I know some things I need to replace. The fuel filter that was on that line is probably in bad shape. That fuel line may also be in bad shape. I'm not exactly sure. But for now, we're going to get this petcock off and start here. And as you can see, there's a lot of rust on this. So this is an issue too. I'm sure that didn't help the carburetor or any of my fueling issues. But I'm grateful for the filter that caught most of it. With the petcock off and out of the way, I'm going to use some Blue Monster thread tape. This stuff is actually good for just about anything. It actually says you can use it for gas or gasoline purposes. So I'm going to thread tape this before I put the new petcock in. And now we'll go ahead and put my new Pingle petcock in. This should be nice. It's obviously brand new. It's something I took out of the package and kind of stored on a shelf for a while, so it does have a little wear on it from the shelf, but it is new. It's never been installed, so it'll be its first time. With the petcock installed and nicely tightened up, it's time to get the fuel line fixed up, get the new fuel filter in place, and put that on. This time around, I've opted to go with one of the see-through fuel filters. It's nice because the screens in these are replaceable. Not that they're not in the other ones, but I can actually see what's going on inside of here. And they, of course, are directional, so I've got to get my inlet side on properly. Now I just need to go to the other side, hook up the carburetor to the fuel line, and then put fuel back in the tanks. Okay, moment of truth. Let's give this thing a couple of prime kicks. Turn the ignition on and see if we can get it to fire. Good morning. Just a quick update on the Panhead. Now I know I was working on it for a little while and I was running into all kinds of issues and I wasn't exactly sure why it wasn't starting and why it wasn't running. I was getting spark at the plugs. Even when I kicked it over, I was actually getting the plugs to spark, but I wasn't getting enough spark or a consistent spark to be able to make the motorcycle run, which led me to believe that the Mallory ignition was giving me issues. Even though I had spark and it was kind of intermittent, that was kind of my feeling. Anyway, I ended up taking my bike to Steve's Antique Auto Repair. It's a buddy of mine's shop here in town. I'll link him in the description below so you guys can check him out too. And he went through and tested that Mallory ignition to find out that the module on top was actually not working properly. He was getting the same results I was getting, where the bike would spark sometimes and not consistently enough to make it run. You could get the bike to kind of putt a little bit and almost start, or start and run for a second and then it would stop. And it was really intermittent. So obviously that module was, not working the way that it should. So I got it replaced and now the bike is back up and running. Obviously I needed it to get to the Relics Riot show. So I had the bike back last Thursday so I could leave Saturday morning to get the bike to the show. Thankfully, Steve took care of me, got the bike fixed. Just wanted to give you guys that update. Let you know the bike is back up and running, and find a way to end this video, because as you saw, I was kicking this thing and scratching my head and looking at parts and trying to figure out what's wrong with the motorcycle. I have upgraded a few things and I'm grateful for that. Well, friends, as always, I appreciate you guys watching my videos. If you like this one, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, hit that subscribe button. If you're looking for antique auto repair, Steve does work on classic cars and motorcycles. Like I said, I'll put that link in the description below. We'll catch you next time, friends.